Listen closely and let me tell you about a girl named Jennifer who grew up believing that love and fairness walked side by side. In her house, she had a younger brother who was the sun in her father's eyes while she was the quiet moon reflecting light that was never fully her own. Their father was a man who had worked hard his whole life building wealth piece by piece and holding it as a symbol of success. But when the time came to share what he had built, he made a choice that would change Jennifer forever. Only morning, Jennifer sat at the breakfast table, her heart calm and steady the way it always was when she expected nothing from the world. Her father entered the room holding a folder filled with papers and a look that seemed heavier than usual. Her brother followed him, smiling with a brightness that filled the space without effort. Their father spoke slowly, his voice firm and final. He said he had made a decision about the inheritance and about the future of his children. Jennifer listened, and she did not interrupt because she had learned long ago that silence often holds more power than words. Her father looked at her brother and said, "I am giving you $55 million. It was as if the room stopped breathing for a moment. Jennifer did not move. Her fingers froze around the cup of coffee that had already gone cold. She tried to understand if she had heard him right, but there was no mistake in his tone. He had given everything to the son and nothing to the daughter. Her brother smiled, not out of cruelty, but out of shock, out of the disbelief that fortune had suddenly chosen him. Jennifer stood up quietly, walked to the window, and looked outside at the sky that seemed far too calm for what had just happened. She felt something inside her crack, not with noise, but with a deep, slow ache. She wanted to ask why, but the words stayed trapped inside her throat. The father said, "You are strong. You will make your own way." And Jennifer almost laughed because strength was never supposed to be a punishment. She went to her room and sat there for hours, thinking about how love can become uneven without warning, how a father can look at his children and still see one as a prize and the other as a test. Days turned into weeks, and the world outside went on as if nothing had changed. But inside Jennifer, a storm was building. She went to work every morning. She greeted people with a smile that was made of courage, not of happiness. Her brother bought new things, cars and houses and friends that appeared like shadows chasing light. Her father visited him often, and every time Jennifer saw them together, it reminded her that she had become invisible in the house she once called home. But invisibility has its own power, and Jennifer started to understand that she did not need to wait for anyone to see her. She only needed to see herself. She began to save the little she earned. She worked 2 jobs and took classes at night. She learned about business, about finance, about how money grows and how it moves, and she promised herself she would one day build something that could never be taken away. She remembered her father's words that she could earn her own, and she decided she would prove him right, but not in the way he imagined. She would do it without resentment, without shouting, without begging for fairness. She would do it by becoming undeniable. Her brother, meanwhile, was learning different lessons. He discovered that money without purpose feels empty. He hosted parties where laughter filled the air, but the laughter never stayed. When the lights went out, the silence after the noise became his companion. He began to realize that wealth can fill rooms, but it cannot fill hearts. Jennifer, on the other hand, was learning to find peace in the slow rhythm of her own effort. She found pride in simple things, like paying her rent on time, like cooking dinner for herself, like seeing her savings account grow even if it was small. She learned that dignity often hides in quiet persistence. Years passed, and people in town began to notice her. She was no longer the quiet daughter, but a woman who built her name from the ground up. Her business started small, a shop that sold handmade goods. But her honesty and her work ethic made it bloom. She hired people, she helped others. And soon her shop became a place where people came not just to buy, but to talk, to feel seen. Her brother would sometimes visit and stand at the door looking at what she had built, his eyes holding something that looked like regret. Their father rarely came. He stayed distant, caught between pride and guilt, unable to face the truth that the daughter he had overlooked had built her own empire without his help. Jennifer never spoke bitterly of him. She carried the hurt inside, but she refused to let it poison her life. She learned that forgiveness is not for the person who caused the pain, but for the one who wants to move forward. She forgave her father quietly, not because he asked, but because she deserved peace. She forgave her brother because she knew he was only a reflection of a father who had made a mistake. And she kept moving forward, her heart scarred, but stronger, her will tested, but unbroken own. Evening, years after the decision that had changed everything, her brother came to her. He looked tired, the shine in his eyes dimmed by choices that had not gone the way he hoped. He said, "Jennifer, I thought having everything would make me happy, but it did not." She looked at him and smiled a small, tired smile. She told him that happiness is never something you can buy, it is something you build day by day. Through struggle and patience and truth, her brother lowered his head and said, "You were always the strong one." Jennifer said, "No, I was just the one who learned to survive when the father grew old and weak." It was Jennifer who cared for him. She brought him food and medicine and sat with him in silence. Sometimes he would look at her and tears would gather in his eyes, but he never spoke of regret, and she never asked for apology, because some things do not need words, they need time. She knew that forgiveness had already been spoken through her actions, through her presence, through the simple fact that she still showed up even after being forgotten. Jennifer learned that being denied can sometimes be the beginning of becoming. She had been denied inheritance, but given endurance. She had been denied money, but given meaning. She had been denied recognition, but given resilience. And when she looked back, she realized that maybe life had given her exactly what she needed to find her true self. Her brother learned too. He learned that love cannot be bought, and that wealth without gratitude is a house built on sand. And so the story of Jennifer became more than a tale of unfairness. It became a lesson about strength, about how a person can rise even when the world tries to shrink them, about how silence can speak louder than words, and how forgiveness can build bridges where bitterness builds walls. Jennifer lived her life not chasing what was taken from her, but creating what could never be taken again. And that is how she turned pain into power and loss into legacy. After all those years, Jennifer had built a life that moved with quiet confidence. Her shop became a place of warmth and laughter, a place where people came not only to buy things, but to feel seen and heard. She had created a world of her own making, a world where fairness was measured by effort and love by action. Her brother sometimes came to visit. Standing at the doorway, unsure if he belonged, he watched Jennifer move among her customers with grace and purpose, and he felt a strange mixture of pride and shame because she had done what he could not. He realized that money had given him everything except the strength she carried in her heart. The father grew older and slower. He would sit by the window and watch Jennifer work, and he understood finally that the choice he had made so long ago had not broken her, it had built her. He thought about the $55 million he had given to his son, and he realized that wealth is fleeting, but resilience endures. He would try to apologize in small ways, by bringing tea, by asking quietly how her day went, by learning the names of her friends and employees. And even though he never said the words she needed, the actions spoke louder than anything he could have uttered. Jennifer forgave not because it was easy, but because she wanted to be free. She had learned that holding on to hurt only anchors a person to the past. She had learned that being overlooked is sometimes the spark that lights determination. She taught this lesson without speaking. She showed it by working harder, by being kinder, by creating a space where people could come and feel hope. She became a mentor to children and young women, teaching them that their value is never measured by what they are given, but by what they create. Her brother began to understand the lessons. Slowly, he gave back to the community, started to invest in small businesses that needed guidance and support. He realized that real wealth is in the hands of those who know how to care. He began to sit with Jennifer, sometimes helping her organize her shop and learning to appreciate her wisdom. He stopped measuring his worth by money alone and started measuring it by the lives he touched and the trust he rebuilt piece by piece with Father. Sometimes joined them in small activities. He planted trees with Jennifer. He watched his grandchildren play. He learned that life is repaired not through grand gestures, but through patient, consistent acts of care and attention. He smiled quietly when he saw Jennifer teaching the children to read and fold paper stars. He noticed that his daughter had grown stronger than he had ever imagined, and he felt pride without words. Jennifer and her brother worked together, occasionally planning small community events. She taught art and crafting classes, and he taught music and sports. The town began to notice the change. The neighborhood became a place where people looked out for each other, and the focus was no longer on wealth, but on kindness and responsibility. She found fulfillment in helping others grow, and he found fulfillment in using his resources to support and uplift others. The cycle of resentment slowly faded, replaced by cooperation and understanding. Years later, Jennifer would look back at the moment her father gave her brother the $55 million. She realized that it had been a turning point, not a curse. She had been forced to rely on her own strength and, in doing so, had discovered her true potential. She realized that sometimes being denied opens doors to paths that would never have been chosen. If life had been fair, she no longer envied her brother. She celebrated his victories and accepted hers, knowing that each journey is unique and value cannot always be measured in currency. Her brother had matured in ways he never expected. He had learned humility. He had learned generosity. He had learned that the brightest currency in life is trust and love. He came to Jennifer often to seek advice, and she guided him without resentment. She became a quiet leader in their family. She became the voice of wisdom and patience. She was no longer the overlooked daughter. She was the foundation of their family, the one who held them steady and reminded them that resilience is a greater gift than any money can buy. Father finally understood that his actions had consequences beyond what he could see. He saw how Jennifer had turned hurt into power and neglect into creativity. He watched her life flourish, and he recognized that his daughter had become a force stronger than any sum of money could ever have made her. He never asked for forgiveness because he saw it in her eyes, in her work, in her actions. She had already given it by living fully and fiercely despite everything. Jennifer continued to build her legacy. She expanded her shop. She started programs for education and mentorship. She inspired children to pursue their dreams and women to claim their own power. She taught that life is not about what is given, but about how one responds to what is taken. She lived by example, showing that patience, effort, and resilience create more lasting impact than wealth or privilege ever could. Her brother joined in, sometimes contributing resources he had learned to manage and to share wisely, and together they began to create a life that honored their family without being bound by its mistakes. Town watched and slowly learned that stories of injustice do not need to end in bitterness. They can end in growth. They can end in action. They can end in transformation. Jennifer became a symbol of what it means to rise above what life denies you and to create what life cannot take away. She became proof that being overlooked can teach strength, that being denied can cultivate wisdom, and that patience and kindness are more powerful than any inheritance. His father grew old and frail. He would sit quietly watching the world around him, and he understood finally that his daughter had always been the stronger one, and his son had been given lessons money cannot buy. He felt a quiet gratitude that life had allowed him to witness Jennifer's rise, and he knew that in her forgiveness, he had found redemption for his mistake. He spent his remaining days observing the family. He had built the way one observes a garden and sees it bloom, not because of a single seed, but because of consistent care and attention. Jennifer often reflected on her journey. She remembered the pain of being overlooked. She remembered the quiet anger she had held in her chest, and she realized that all of it had led her to this moment of strength. She understood that her story was not about being denied money, it was about discovering self-worth. It was about learning to turn adversity into opportunity, to find joy and fulfillment through her own efforts. She taught others to do the same, and in doing so she multiplied the power she had gained. Her brother now stood beside her as a partner in growth, not in competition. He understood the value of listening and giving. He supported initiatives she created, and he learned to measure his success not in wealth, but in positive impact together. They continued to repair the subtle fractures in their family and community by choosing actions over resentment, by building hope instead of dwelling on past wrongs. Father passed quietly one evening, but his presence remained in the lessons Jennifer had learned. And in the community, she had nurtured the story of Jennifer and her brother. And their father became a tale told quietly to children about resilience and forgiveness, about using pain to create purpose, about how strength can emerge from denial, and how love can be expressed in actions more than words. Jennifer kept living fully. She kept teaching, she kept creating, and she kept forgiving. She understood that life is rarely fair, but it can still be beautiful, and she carried this understanding with her as she walked through the streets of her town, greeted by people who knew her for her deeds, not her inheritance. And in that legacy she found the final truth that power earned and love given are the greatest treasures of all, and no paper sum could ever replace them.